In today's episode, we're going to focus on the interior of the Agora model's 1/8 scale Cobra. This is a pre-painted kit, simply just needs to be assembled. Now, I decided not to change anything that came with the kit and just go with the flow, enjoy myself, and not have too complicated of a time or overcomplicate things by painting all of it, replacing parts, etc. So in this case, I'm just going to follow the instructions, take out all of the parts, and install them as they need to be done. The only thing that I decided to change for the video series is to go in a sort of non-chronological order by not following the instructions entirely. I'm just going to focus on the interior in this episode, so some parts might be skipped in this one and will be picked up in the next one. You will probably see some parts for the exterior already installed in some parts of the videos, and then later on in the next series they will be uninstalled again, as that was done for this video, just to follow the storyline a bit and make it a lot easier and more fun to follow the specific sections of the build rather than go all over the place and not have it make all that much sense. So on the dashboard there are a lot of buttons and switches that still needs to be installed. Some needs to be cut out of some screws and then simply just pressed in place. Others did require a little bit of glue, as the fit up was a bit too loose and they could fall out fairly easily, so some glue was put in place to keep them there permanently. On the gauge cluster, a couple of stickers needed to be applied for the actual gauges themselves, and they were not really printed and cut in the full center, so they needed to be placed off center a little bit so they were in the exact right spot. The main section of the dashboard has now been completed, so we can move on to the larger section of the actual floor pan, transmission tunnel, and the main interior tub, so to speak. These were all screwed together by simply just placing them in and then using the supplied screws, and some other parts just needs to be snapped in place. Not all of it is a screw together, but a lot of it is, and I'm guessing not everyone wants to see me screwing everything together, so I'm just going to skip the screwing part and maybe just show a couple of the pressing pieces, but mainly focus just on the assembly and have it a bit more enjoyable to watch instead of just watching me screw. Behind some of the buttons on the dashboard and also some of these pedals right here, there are actual switches and wires connected to it from the backside, and these will all be routed to a circuit board later on to follow in one of the final episodes. And then once you put a battery in it, you should be able to light things up if it is connected correctly. So I'm skipping the part of installing the wires, as that's pretty boring and can be a bit complicated, so not everything was filmed all that well. So this kit is being produced, or at least bought, by Agora models at the moment, and it has also been produced by a different manufacturer in the past, and on those kits it had a bit of a different seat. In this case, Agora models decided to change the design on the seat and actually make them out of a sort of leather and a fabric backing. I personally am not a really big fan, as I don't really like the look of leather on scale models, but some people will probably see this as a huge upgrade. I will leave that up to you. So once the leather, sort of leather pleather, the fabric on the seat that's looking like leather, I'm not sure if it's actually leather or not, was installed to some of the sticky back or double-sided tape, I could move on to installing the seat belts as well, and then move on to installing some detailed pieces for behind the seats. These are the batteries, some wiring as well, and then putting the seats in a bit later. So in the main piece of the interior tub behind the seats, you need to install some hooks for the seat belts to hook onto. On the driver's side, there will be a rollover hoop installed in the actual bodywork with some of these hooks in there too for that seat belt. So it's pretty cool they took those details in as well and made it look even more realistic and also function a bit more like the actual cars did. After installing the door panel, I could move on to installing the actual hinge. It just needed to be screwed together and then a cover plate on top to make it look nice and neat. There is also a sort of latch which kind of functions. It needs to be assembled with a small spring and then into a housing and screwed in there too, just to keep it in place. It is very important not to screw this down too tight, as then the actual mechanism will get stuck and won't function as it should be, as the spring itself simply can't hold the pressure from the screw. So just don't screw it in too tight, leave it a bit loose so you can just move it around and it actually functions. Before installing the dashboard into the main body, there is a rod and the steering wheel that need to be connected in there too. This is a press fit and it is a really tight fit. When looking through the instructions, they actually suggest using a hammer to hammer the steering wheel on. I don't think that's a great idea. I simply just pressed it in very, very hard. It took quite a bit of force, but eventually it was in there, and it's never going to come out. So then the dashboard could be installed too. With both doors now installed too, there is a there is a furry cover plate which needs to be installed as well. This is simply just pressed in place to hide some of the wiring and also some of the hinges, and to finish it off nice and neatly to go nicely with the rest of the interior tub. Now in this case you can see some of the components for the engine bay on the front and also the rear trunk and wiring have been installed. I will focus more on that on the next video, but like I said at the beginning, this is mainly focusing on the interior and the parts surrounding that, so please forgive me for showing some of the parts for the next video. But in this case, the main interior tub needed to be press fit in place and was then also screwed in on a couple of areas as well to keep it in there permanently. And then from the top I could install that rollover hoop, a small bar that goes to the trunk area, and the other one that just slides in through the bodywork behind the seat to finalize the interior. And with that said and done, the interior is completed, and as you can see on these photos, so is the rest of the build. So the following episodes will focus on finishing off the chassis, installing some of the components into the bodywork, and hopefully finalizing the entire build in that video too.